All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Paul Bruce, and once again, I'm back here with a member of the DevOps community, Dave Fredricks. Now, Dave, you organize the DevOps Days Boston event, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Been a participant, volunteer organizer for the last 3 years, involved for the last four.
Excellent. And I got a chance to meet you beforehand, I think, at one of the DevOps Days Boston meetups. But then also we got to chat at the event. And it was a really good event. I think a number of different things were really just cohesed really well, particularly from my point of view, the open spaces, the collaborative open spaces. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like, how that got into the conference schedule?
Yeah, certainly. So Open Spaces is a really interesting kind of platform that's unique to DevOps Days. There's basically how it works is everybody comes up with topics during the event, right? So after listening to some of the keynotes, some discussions that are interesting to individuals, a lot of times you want to add your personal perspective into not only offering new ideas or maybe even some suggestions, but asking specific questions. And a way of being able to do that is by getting everyone together at the event over common topics, and you basically vote on different things, different topics that are of interest to you, and they can actually go anywhere from cultural to personal to technology as a whole. And the idea is there's a few rules. It's basically 2 feet. What's being said is what needs to be said. Who's there is the people that need to be there. When it starts and when it ends is the time it's supposed to start and end. Those are the only kind of, guidelines that we go by, right? The idea is to get people who usually wouldn't be, open to, public speaking, to be able to have a chance and an opportunity to either share some ideas, ask questions specifically and directly to different individuals, and to have an open forum. The real values that come out of it is real specific dialogue. The biggest thing is new introductions and relationships that are created. And the hope is throughout the year, after a DevOps Days event, is for you to be able to get contact information of individuals who are in the same space, time, and kind of stage as yourself, to have an outside outlet to be able to bounce ideas off of through the year as you start to face some of the challenges as an engineer trying to solve problems.
Yeah, and I think that was one of those things that really clicked for me. Being part of a number of those open spaces, I saw exactly what you said, which was people were far more likely to comment and to share and to ask questions than in a larger audience. And I think the other element of that is the fact that not only do they get to share, but they get instant feedback. And this is one of those like paradigm core tenets, I think, of DevOps in my mind, is this concept of continuous learning, but you don't learn unless you know what's going on, and you don't know what's going on unless you radiate information, which is typically facilitated by feedback loops. And so whether we're talking about like technology feedback loops or real people feedback loops, I think that's really helpful. So can I back up for a second and actually ask you a slightly broader question about DevOps? In your mind, how would you define DevOps? How would you say, what is that to you?
Oh, great question. Because this is one that in our community we talk a lot about, especially for folks who are outside of quote unquote the DevOps thought process, knowing that it's something that's taking on by force in the software world. One of the things we do is talk about how do we define DevOps, right? And the biggest thing for me is DevOps means different things to different people, and it's all about context and perspective, where you come from and where you've been and what challenges you're trying to solve. So when I meet somebody new who's in this space and they're starting to kind of either chant or evangelize to me without first getting a baseline perspective as to where I'm at and what I'm doing and what I'm trying to solve, immediately that has me question, okay, are you trying to push your ideals down on me? Because this is what DevOps means to me. Getting folks to work together in an efficient, collaborative manner to solve a common goal, period. It has nothing to do with tools. It has nothing to do with process. It has nothing to do with frameworks. It's all about getting people together, teaching context, having empathy, understanding what somebody's doing, why they need to do it, and how, what they've been doing in the past. You share your ways of doing it, and then together, when you have a sense of, okay, I know why this person has to do these things, I know the reason why they're thinking this way, we can efficiently solve problems. And for me, that's what DevOps is to the core right there.
So one thing I heard from that, if I'm kind of paraphrasing or summarizing, let me know if I'm wrong, but it starts with people, right? It doesn't start with tools. It doesn't start with how you've been doing it. It starts with people and really understanding the context and the perspective that they bring to the table. Is that right?
Yeah, Paul, you nailed it right there. It starts, it continues, and it ends with people. Ultimately, I take the concepts and the core principles of DevOps, and you can apply that to any industry, any product, any delivery, any manufacturing. And it really is bringing people together to work more efficiently to solve a common problem.
And so actually people are doing that. You'll hear the prevalence of these amalgam terms like DevSecOps, Dev Test QA SecOps. And I kind of take issue with that in the sense that, understanding how important terminology and clear labels for things are, as a practitioner, as an engineer, as soon as somebody starts to blow out the term to mean all the things, my red flags get raised up instantly. That doesn't mean that it doesn't include other people, but can you tell us a little bit about how important the scope is of DevOps to you, and just kind of following that up with some context. I was able to speak to Tom McGrage from the DevOps Day Seattle, and he was very clear about how if we blow it out into all the things, it loses its value. And so I put this to you. Why is a pantheistic term, if it grows to that, why is that a problem?
No, that's a great thought, right? And I want to let's take this back a little bit, right? And kind of identify, why are all these acronyms being added on, and why is this being branded in such a way, right? Because this was a discussion that I have, especially with growing teams, right? One of the biggest things I talk about with organizations is, first and foremost, technically there is no DevOps engineers. So why label it that way? And when I started working with a lot more enterprises, I help organizations transform, their development to be much more modern, so they can have a quicker release and feedback. So, one of the things that used to frustrate me was like, hey, we need 5 DevOps engineers. Oh, okay. That doesn't mean anything to me, right? Like, you got to explain on a day-to-day, what is this person doing? And ultimately, like, why are we labeling these folks as DevOps engineers? And I had some interesting feedback for it, right? And it came from a product marketing side, and they were like, Dave, look, we're in the enterprise. We're used to big, long deploys of software in order to get it to our customers. And a lot of times we don't know if our customers are even getting any value out of what we're producing, right? When you're releasing every year and, we're waiting for 6 months to get the actual feedback from our customers, it doesn't make any sense. So you see this large swath of folks trying to get into this space to build software quicker, to have faster feedback, to be able to add more value to end users. These individuals don't really understand this whole open source community. We don't understand how like the strength of the community is really the value. So we don't know how to really market. We don't know how to, communicate to the group. So in a way for us to be able to kind of blanket it all together, we just scope it into this thing and we call it, DevOps, and everything gets that kind of label to it. And from my experience, what I'm starting to see is a lot more of these organizations who are maybe specific to security, they're specific to testing, in a way of being able to catch and grasp that member of the audience. It's let's throw it in, DevSecOps, Dev quality, ops, things of that nature. What starts to happen in my mind, and what I'm worried about, is it's people start to lose the real purpose and meaning of DevOps.
So basically, the exact same thing that happened to Agile. Everybody forgot to have agility as one of the core tenets, so to speak, that people check in on a regular basis. That they internalize that, and that is where their activities and their tools flow from, right? And so,
yeah, exactly. If you start to get too focused on like the terminologies and the labeling of things, and forget the context as to why you're practicing it, ultimately, the further downstream you get, and the more generations that start to get, folded into the process, they'll start to lose the actual scope. Hey, we're trying to get people to work together in a more collaborative and transparent manner, to be efficient and to be able to deliver quickly.
Yeah. The one thing that I did recently was put out an article, and thank you. You had shared it to a number of people, and I think that's half the reason why it got some attention. But it was essentially how to be a good a DevOps tool vendor, or tool or services, whatever. But it took the approach of looking at it from the customer's perspective, and the implementation of that was over a customer journey, a simplified customer journey. And then chronologically through that journey, I went through and basically made statements from an outsider's perspective onto different groups, whether it be product, marketing, sales. From your perspective too, I get that it has to be fundamentally start with people, right? Because people are what build teams, and teams are what build software, and software is what affects us. But the team affects us, and individuals affect us, and so it does make sense to keep that as a core value, is to consider the personal responsibility and also the responsibility of the team to have these cultural aspects present. But unfortunately, I think what happens is that we do need tools, and conferences are notorious for needing some kind of funding and being self-funding, and so out comes sponsor packages or friend packages or whatever those are called. And I mean, it's an ecosystem, right? All software is eventually, in most people's mind, going to make money. And so this is where I was coming from, understanding that there is no such thing as a DevOps vendor or a DevOps tool or a DevOps position. Yet the fact is that when you're closely aligned with the thinking of another person, and that's the term they're using, it's easy for these vendors to kind of bring that in and pull that into their messaging. So I guess my point of view on that is that we are going to have to deal with that, but it's kind of a constant battle against the pantheism of trying to all the things a term. But in the meantime, we also do have to represent those tenets, right? To your point, there's these core principles. We have to represent those in more than just the developers and the operations, right? If you really want to sell to developers and operations or teams that are looking for that, maybe they have internalized DevOps, they're going to be looking at the world from this interesting perspective. And they'll be looking across the tool chain to figure out, like, who sounds like they're blowing smoke up, And so if a tool vendor or if a service provider does not understand the core of it, then their messaging, their selling process, their product ideation, it's all not going to jive with the market. So I think, I guess I should hand it back to you with a question. But, we, after a recent meetup, we kind of jived on this for like an hour and a half, and just really talked about how do we actually do this. My concern is that when we start to move this into the enterprise, and by the way, the good principles of DevOps should be movable to the enterprise, right? If they work, they work. and it's a matter of fitting to context. That I think, the while the core of it is culture, we can't just live in this sort of kumbaya world. And we really have to figure out how to scale this up and out into the enterprise setting, so that, by the way, these good principles have a positive impact on things like automated insurance, things like machine learning in terms of healthcare, right? Defense, government settings. So I'm working on that on the side, but in the meantime, what do you think about scaling to the enterprise? What does that even mean for DevOps?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, right? And it's an interesting challenge. There's a lot of organizations who are facing it right now. I'll give you some specifics. Like I'm like dealing with some situations where we're starting to see a lot of enterprise buy instead of trying to go and build themselves, right? One thing they have is capital and resources. So the idea is if we don't know or we can't make it, it's the buy versus build, right? Like, why go out and try to do what people already are being really successful in doing in something that we don't understand too well? Let's just go ahead and start to, absorb some of these startups, right?
Do you mean actually purchasing startups in order to just fill that technical gap in an organization? So I don't want to name names, but I'm thinking a very large enterprise that just recently bought one of the most known API monitoring services out there and acquired them, and people are freaking out like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? Are they going to deculture this awesome group of guys and gals? I don't really want to say the name just in case, but
we'll keep everything. Everything kind of anonymous. But because I'm dealing with the same thing with an organization, a large security company buying a smaller, more nimble security product with a lot of open source options that they're putting out there, trying to create groundswell, right? Get this tool for free into the hands of engineers, let them play with it so they can understand how it works, and create some kind of a swell within the engineering teams. And then we'll come up to the top, start talking to the executives about, hey, what challenges are you facing, in this broad space, right? Where you're trying to protect not only your customers' information, but also information about your company. As they start to have that type of dialogue, all of a sudden the executives within the organization starts to look down, talking to their engineering group and saying, hey, what have you played with? What do you think is interesting? How do you think we should be solving this problem? You've already created that initial lift of inertia. Engineering then says, hey, let's go with this product. We already know how it works. We've been, tooling around with it. Win-win, right? So this is a completely different way of thinking of how enterprise used to be selling products into their customers. It was always a top-down approach. Let's talk to the executives who have the purchase power, float it down, and then they'll disseminate that information in the way that we roll it out into the engineering team, right? That's how you could do it in the old school way. Now in today's new world, right, a lot of tools are available for you to play with for free, right? And when enterprise organizations start to try to come into this space, they're really kind of blindsided by this whole new this new content creation thought process. And what I'm starting to see is they're at least now recognizing we do not know how to sell to this community, to this group. We really know, we really want to get into the space. We want to do it the right way. What do we do, right? And, to your point with your article, I've shared your article with all of the enterprises that have been talking to me about this problem, right? Because I can't teach them about the thought process of open source. We can look back at back in the 60s at the MIT days where the two groups kind of, split off. A lot of us in our space, in the DevOps space, already have the mentality of, hey, we want to be able to share a lot of this stuff. But we do want value for hard work we do. But for the most part, there's different ways of doing it versus everything is being paid for, with the enterprise mentality. What I'm starting to experience is there's a lot of organizations out there that are realizing, hey, it's exponential value once we start to get into this community, and the brand loyalty within this community is tremendous, you know. But the challenge that is in front of us right now is really that learnings piece, and I'm, you know, kind of to boil it down, I'm thinking it's a leadership issue, and this is my own personal views, right? It's enterprise leadership needs to get out of the way and allow for new blood to come in to be able to understand the you know, kind of the movement. I've been doing as much as I can to try to influence old leadership. It's a challenge, and you know, a lot of it has to do with success syndrome, right? You've been successful doing it a certain way for decades. You know, why are you going to change the way you do it now? And you know, it's you know, but it'll be interesting. It's a great case study that we're going to be able to kind of sit back and watch for the next 5 years. Yeah,
and you know what? There's a lot going on. There's so much going on. No one person can do it alone. So without plugging any commercial products of any kind, that's not my motion. I have started something called the Iterative Research Collective. And so iterative research is essentially a bunch of contributors to research as they go along. It could be lightweight contributions, simply just pocketing articles and getting into a feed of people who pay attention. It's writers, but the point is it's not on a brand that's connected to a pay-for service. And, you know, I would love for this conversation to really start flowing in that direction, because I think it takes many perspectives, right? The core of this is it's an inclusive conversation, not an exclusive one. So understanding that you are a busy man and we're at the top of our time, are there one or two things that you just want to you know, give a shout out to, or any particular resources that people can go to, events, communities, open source forums, anything like that?
Yeah. You know, in closing, thank you so much for the opportunity, first and foremost.
We're going to have to do it again.
One of the things I would highly recommend folks who are interested in getting more involved, start to look at some local meetups that you have going on. There are some great folks within every community that have been in whatever city, whatever small town, who are interested in sharing ideas and thoughts and challenges. All you have to do is get out there and look, and you know, and go find your tribe. The biggest thing is, don't sit back and sit on your hands and expect for answers to come to you. You know, the whole constant learner, you know, the Kaizen mentality, you know, be better tomorrow than you are today, be better today than you are yesterday. It lives and dies in DevOps. And the way to do it is start to talk to folks who you're not used to talking to, right? So don't be afraid. Get out there, introduce yourself, and have a good time, because life is learning.
Cool. So that's David Fredricks, everyone. And thank you, David, for spending the time with me. Do you prefer going by Dave or David?
Dave or David. Dave's usually what I'm called, but it's
all right, David.
Thank you so much, Paul. I really enjoyed it. You know, it was great, you know, being able to spend some time with you.
All right, we'll circle back. Thank you so much. Cheers.